All right.
Joining us now from Washington, D.C., she needs no sleep nor an introduction, Congresswoman Barbara Comstock. Congresswoman,
Good morning.
Great to have you. You got a
Great
whole
to be with
contingent
you.
here. Bill Stanley, Chap Peterson, Tommy McNeil, Andrew Vehorn, and me. It's good to have you.
Good morning, Barbara.
Hi, Barbara.
Good morning. Good morning. You all aren't in hearings
So-
already?
No, they're just here with me.
All my
Okay.
legislation's been defeated, so I got nothing to do.
Congressman, tell us about the vote last night, how things went down, and what you did. Give us your insight.
Well, we had I think, a very good result. We had, I think, what is a great victory for our men and women in the military. We got a bipartisan compromise in the Senate. There's a large bipartisan vote. Virginia senators voted for this budget and for this agreement, and it fully funds our troops at the level that Secretary Mattis said was essential, and it's also ended the defense sequestration, which has been a top priority of many of us, including me. And you now have that certainty in planning on the budget that we need that actually saves money, because as our generals were telling us, these continuing resolutions and stops and starts was costing us billions. So now we have that certainty where they can plan long term. They can work with, with our defense needs. And then with the tax bill, we have certainty there that allows our businesses to grow, our families to know what their tax situation is going to be. And a lot of families are already seeing the benefits of that. And with the regulatory reform. So I think we've put ourselves in a good position here now for bipartisan solutions here on keeping the country safe and secure and protecting our national security, as well as making it prosperous and growing the economy.
All right, so you voted in favor of it. The president's going to sign it.
Yeah.
Government stays
I guess
open
I
for
got
2 years, right? I mean, we finally have a budget.
No.
But what about the debt, Barbara? I mean, we're looking at another, some people estimate another $1.3 trillion added to the national debt, which could bring it to 21.5, 22 trillion. What's the long-term plan for this?
Well, I think we are still going to be, how we spend it and how we invest, the priorities that we are going to put it into our infrastructure, which is something, we know we need in Virginia, we need nationally. That kind of investment is always a good force multiplier. We're also, it's going to, I should have mentioned, I mean, I know this is a small thing, but it's something you've seen commercials on, what this measure also included. Just one of the small things that was in it was eliminating the IPAB board. Remember the Independent Payment Advisory Board that was part of Obamacare? That's been eliminated here. So, ending the sequestration cuts. Now, the increase, we needed the increase on the defense side. I mean, we've had things like, 80 80 deaths, military casualties in training and operations, not in the war theaters, but in training and operations. And that's, been a direct result of the lack of resources available for training, maintenance, modernization, and, just having readiness for our military. So we needed to increase that spending. Part of the bipartisan agreement to get this on a bipartisan and bicameral basis was also additional domestic spending. But I think going forward, we're also going to do things that I know my colleagues down in Richmond are also looking at, are having work requirements for welfare or Medicaid, so that we take this opportunity right now where we have low unemployment, we need more people back in the workplace, and we get people back to work. And if they're getting benefits and they're able-bodied, and able to work, we want them to work and get them on that path to prosperity. So if you have work requirements, we know, that'll move them over onto the side of the ledger where they are making money and paying taxes, but also moving up the economic ladder, and that will, decrease some of our, high spending costs on the welfare side.
Congresswoman, great segue to Chap Peterson, because he's with us right now, and we're going to let Tommy weigh in on this. But, Senator, I know you've been trying to negotiate a Medicare expansion compromise here as we go forward.
Right.
Barbara talking about the work requirements in that. How is this whole thing going to play out?
Well, I'm optimistic we're going to get something in the General Assembly this year. There's a lot of moving parts, John, and without betraying what people have told me, there are a lot of moving parts. Personally, a work requirement for Medicaid is, to my way of thinking, somewhat superfluous because most people that aren't covered right now are the working people.
That's my question.
I mean,
that's the question I
that's
keep
the whole
asking.
point.
That's the point of Medicaid expansion
right.
is to cover working people.
We're trying to cover people making up to 138% of poverty level.
Right.
Well, that means they have some income.
Right. So they're already working.
Yeah, so theoretically they're already working. But listen, if that's what it takes, I mean, we put a work requirement on TANF years ago. So that to me is not a huge issue. I mean, there's some other issues about having people make a copay and treat them as if they're part of an HMO network, so they have the same obligations and responsibilities as those of us that are in HMOs. I'm totally cool with that. That makes total sense to me. So I think there's a lot of details that need to be ironed out. But at the end of the day, John, look, I'm all about, to me, let's just try and get people insured. Let's try and get them seeing doctors. Let's try and get them exercising and living healthy. I mean, we want people to live more healthy lives, and to me, using the federal money that's available helps do that.
Yes, but that's the thing, though, Congresswoman, when you talk about work requirements for Medicaid expansion in Virginia, I mean, Medicaid expansion is designed for people that are working. So I never really got how this ties in.
I mean, obviously we're looking at that overall on welfare too.
Right, at the federal level, right.
For people who aren't, we've had over the past decade or so a lower participation in employment, overall. It was down to where it was in the 70s. So we need to get people back into the workplace. I often hear from employers in my district who are looking for people in the range of $18 to $20 an hour, entry-level jobs that have benefits, so you wouldn't have to worry about Medicaid. You'd be getting health care. You'd be getting, maybe a 401k plan or other benefits that they have a hard time finding workers. So we want workforce development is also going to be something we want to get, in getting people back into the workplace. If they need that training, we'll support, we want to support the companies that are helping people get back into the workplace and get into those jobs because, when we have these, we want to match the job to the person, or the training, to the open jobs so that we have all these, we're always talking about things like cybersecurity. We have over 30,000 jobs in cybersecurity are open, and we have companies now who will train employees or take kids like right out of high school who've gotten cyber training in high school and start training them and keeping them in that workforce and that pipeline. So we do have some good opportunities here with what I think is going to be a good and growing economy to take advantage of that to, help lower some of our overall government costs.
Congresswoman Comstock, this is Tommy McNeil here, and I'm the messenger. It's my job to ask the questions of the lawmakers what the constituents have been asking, and there are several questions. One main question that I have seen, Congress votes to give itself pay raises. It has great benefits. We've had 2 government shutdowns in as many months.
Actually, we haven't voted for pay raises for years, and I have not supported
But it still
that.
gives itself its own pay raises. And so the question is, how are you being held accountable aside from, having elections every so many years when your job is to keep the government running? Your job is to make sure federal employees and transportation and everything is running, but you continue to get paid, you continue to give yourself pay raises and in fact, you're not keeping the government running like it's supposed to. How do you respond to that?
Well, we have. With this budget, we have done that. That is why I thought it was important to get this bipartisan budget done and be able to have certainty in the process so that our federal employees aren't, going from crisis to crisis, and we have this type of continuity. So this has been a big breakthrough here. And again, I'll point out we have not voted for pay raises, nor would I support that. And in fact, when we had just a couple of days shut down in the past, I donated my pay for those days to, dedicated to donating it to charity instead of keeping it. But I think Going forward now, we're not going to have that situation. We are committed to having a budget process now, and that is what we voted for in the early hours of today.
I know. I think it ended at 3:30 a.m. I think you voted on it, and I was on the way from D.C. to
somewhere close to 6 a.m.
4 a.m. or something, right? I mean, I was on the way down from D.C. Hey, I want to take advantage. Congresswoman Barbara Comstock, Republican, 10th District, Virginia. Chap Peterson's here. Can we talk Metro?
Sure.
A little bit of Metro because both you guys and Congresswoman Barbara Comstock, State Senator Chap Peterson, Fairfax, tied into this, and I have an interest in this now because I live in D.C. half the time. I take Metro I've fallen in love with Metro. I take it everywhere because whenever I take my car, Tommy, I get a parking ticket.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what I do, you get a parking ticket. So now I gave up. I just take Metro. How are we going to get this thing fixed?
Okay, well, there's a bill creeping through the Senate, which has my name on it along with some other folks, that has a variety of local revenues that it dedicates to Metro, and I'm thinking that the target amount is $150 million a year or in that ballpark. The biggest thing for us from the Northern Virginia side is getting the state to be in the game, so it's not just our local money, but having the state, and I guess Barbara can talk about the federal side. There's a lot of issues with Metro. I mean, we could spend all day talking about it. They do have a better general manager now than they did previously. I think to some extent the District of Columbia has reached an equilibrium that they weren't at, say, 5 years ago. So, look, we'd like to come to the table with more money. I think we have the ability to do it. I was never a fan of the 2013 transportation package because it bifurcated the tax rate between Northern Virginia and the rest of the state, and I didn't like that.
Right.
So, maybe if, again, to me, you need to have state money, so it's not just solely on the back of the Northern Virginia commuters.
So, Congresswoman, how does that tie into the Comstock legislation, what Chap just said?
Well, what we've done, and it could be very complimentary, is we make it a partnership also, continuing along the lines of what we had with the PREA funding, which has been the past 10 years. We had federal government gave $150 million, and Virginia, D.C., and Maryland each gave $50. So you had a total of $300 million going into Metro for the past 10 years from the region, with half of that coming from the federal government. What my bill does is say we add additional money to that funding. We continue that PREA funding, but also add additional money. But the additional money comes after we have substantial reforms and put in place a reform board that will, bring the costs down and, bend the cost curve and see some labor reforms, things like moving to a 401k from a pension system for new employees. We know that would save a lot of money, and that's been recommended by the new general manager, Paul Wiedefeld. In fact, we put in to our bill a lot of the general manager's recommendations that he had made that have not been adopted yet at this point. And we also worked with the Federal City Council, with the Washington Board of Trade, Jim Dyke, who's familiar to my colleagues in Virginia because he has served the Commonwealth as Secretary of Education, but he's also been on a number of Metro boards in the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission. He worked extensively with us too on this reform measure. So I think it's a good measure that has a lot of buy-in from people throughout the region, and we've talked to Governor Hogan also. So I think we are, now with this infrastructure money, which is in this budget plan, I hope we can, include Metro in that overall plan for infrastructure.
Well, one of the things that the House leadership touched on yesterday in their news conference, you talked about, and that's this reform board. It only allocates, their plan only allocates about $105 million to Metro without raising taxes. It's more of an allocation. But I specifically asked, how much of this is contingent on what Maryland and D.C. will do. And they said, you know what? They have to come up with their own reform boards. That there's too much going on with Metro to not be held accountable. And we're not willing to give Metro this money if this doesn't happen. So
So you want to tie the money to the reforms.
Right.
So look, I'm just going to talk to this
and
as
I
a
did
writer.
talk with Speaker Cox briefly. We had gone back and forth a little bit in discussing this, because I knew in his announcement, I guess this week also, we haven't had a chance to talk about it extensively, but I know he's talked about being on the same page in terms of having the reforms first, so that you are putting new money into a system that is going to have substantial reforms, and we're not going to continue to see the same problems over and over again.
So as a writer, I'm just going to talk as a writer, right? And Tom, you're a writer, right?
I have written.
Right. Okay. I am a writer, right? Because when I'm there, I write it every day. I'm there 3 times a week, and I take it everywhere. So I don't really see the problems as a writer. I mean, is it just, have I avoided them? It comes on time. It gets you where you want to go.
Breakdowns and
I've never been on one.
Well, let me speak to that.
I guess
That's why
I just
said
been
I have
lucky.
ridden, and so I drive. I'm not going to say how long it takes me to get to DC without traffic, but it takes me about. I give myself at least 5 hours, depending on what time I'm going into DC. Now, there are times where I have parked at the Springfield station.
Yes.
And taken the metro.
Yeah, I do that.
But it has taken me an hour and 45 minutes to get from the Springfield station to the L'Enfant Plaza station.
How can it take an hour and 45 minutes?
An hour and 45 minutes.
That's impossible.
And we
What
I
time
had
do you get there?
breakdowns.
Like 1 in the morning?
In the morning, in the afternoon, all kinds. Yeah, and you don't know whether or not there's going to be single tracking, if there's going to be some type of maintenance issue. And so therefore I said, you know what? If I got to park my car, pay $5, still pay for the metro, and still take me an hour 45 minutes to get to L'Enfant Plaza, I may as well drive my car.
Right. Well, I guess so. I just haven't. I've been fortunate. I haven't seen these big issues that come on, because I take it virtually everywhere: White House, Congress, Capitol. Go to dinner, meet somebody. I took it to DuPont Circle the other day. I had a meeting there, and I just haven't experienced them. But look,
the general manager has been doing a better job, and so we want to support. I mean, my bill is designed to support him, but be able to accelerate the changes that he wants to make, including some of the ones he hasn't been able to make yet.
How does this affect the?
Like the pension reform, but also we do put a limit on some of the cost growth, because we've the current compact really makes it difficult for them to make sort of business-like decisions. And the change in the board was something that's been recommended by John Delaney. We were on a bill together last Congress where he talked about having a more professionalized board, and so we adopted that because that was something that had been recommended by a number of the groups that have looked at how we need to reform Metro, and sort of the unwieldy, large political board has just made it difficult for day-to-day operations, I think.
Well, Barbara, we got 2 minutes. How does this affect the expansion of the line, the stations that are proposed that they're working on beyond Tyson's Corner? How does it affect that?
Well, it's really somewhat separate from that, because this is more sort of a overall structural reform of Metro, but it obviously will help and enhance that. I mean, we are, I think the success of Metro, and I'm sure my colleagues there would agree too, is essential to the region, and I'm very much committed to that. But how we we have already committed to expanding it into Loudoun, but any type of future things are really going to depend on bending this cost curve and having a system that's much more efficient, put safety first so that you can get riders back on there. We've had somewhat of a decline in ridership instead of expansion of ridership over the past few years because of the unreliability, because of the accidents. So we need to have a system that people can trust, can get to work on time, it's reliable, and safety number one too, of course.
We are out of time. I want to thank Barbara Comstock for being with us. Barbara, I know you've worked on this bill for about a decade. Just so to let you know, your colleague in there, Cherry Connolly, worked on it for 8 days, and he put it in his own bill. Just FYI. John Fredericks Radio Network. Thank you. Thanks, Barbara Comstock, for being with us on Zero Sleep. Barbara, time to get to bed, right?
Okay. Yep. Well, I'll do that tonight.